And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Happy Groundhog Day. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan coming to you from the National Weather Service, and this is your Alaska marine weather outlook for this weekend. Well, starting with the ice, it's rather extensive. We've had such cold weather the past couple of weeks, and that really cold northeasterly offshore flow from the mainland has allowed the ice to really build westward, covering much of the central northern Bering Sea all the way out to St. Matthew and well off of the coast of the Kuskokwim and Bristol Bay areas. We also see ice develop here on the Bering side of the Alaska Peninsula, as well as all the way down to near Anchor Point in Cook Inlet. And this is about as far as the ice has developed southward in Cook Inlet in several years. Same thing, having ice show up this far down along the Alaska Peninsula. It's been a little while. But looking at the weather pattern, it is changing. The really cold air that's been sitting over the mainland into the southwest interior is going to be lifting out. And as a result, the pattern changing, we're going to see a parade of low pressure systems moving from the North Pacific up into the Bering Sea. That's already underway, and they're going to start crossing up into the Gulf of Alaska. This is just a weak remnant low from system impacting the area a couple days ago. But this pattern will continue to be progressive here over the next couple of weeks, which is going to bring more precipitation into areas of the southwest, south central, into the panhandle. So what's going to happen over the weekend, high pressure that's centered as of this Friday afternoon over the east central mainland is going to shift eastward later Saturday into Sunday. And this is going to open the door as these weather systems and fronts begin to nudge up, bringing in that warmer air over the much colder ground. That's a perfect situation for overrunning snowfall. And as a result, blizzard conditions are expected Saturday into Saturday night along areas of the southwest coast, the Kuskokwim Bay area down through Dillingham up into the lower portion of the Alaska Range, north end here of the Alaska Peninsula. And that snow will be spreading inland up Cook Inlet, eastern Kenai into the Anchorage Bowl by the time we get into Saturday evening, Saturday night. And then over along the northeastern Gulf Coast later Saturday night into Sunday and Sunday night. So pattern kind of getting revigorated here along areas of the Gulf Coast and southern parts of the state. By Sunday afternoon, initial wave there, bringing that snow to about the Alaska Range into parts of the Panhandle. And here comes yet another low, pretty deep down around 960 millibars into the central Aleutians. That'll be the next system as this front works its way northeastward. The moisture along that could spread another round of some light to maybe moderate snow in south central areas here Monday into early Tuesday. So looking at the marine forecast for the inner channels, winds will be south there, Ketchikan, 3-foot waves, easterly, Stevens Passage, 20 knots, 4-foot waves, northerly, 20 knots, Lynn Canal. Offshore flow, I should say, the outer waters here along the Gulf, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, south of Sitka, waves 6, 7, 8 feet. East-northeast flow off Yakutat there with waves of 6 to 7 feet. And then on Sunday, we expect southeast winds 10 to 15 knots, Ketchikan, Metlakatla on up through Petersburg, but northerly still 20 knots, Lynn Canal with gusts to 35 knots, waves there running as high as 4 or 5 feet. And then as we look out here toward the Gulf Coast, winds will be southerly around and south of Sitka, 20 to 35 knot gusts possible with 10-foot waves. Southeast winds 25 to as high as 35 knots out there toward Cape Suckling, where waves could build as high as 15 feet. Northwestern Gulf, northeast winds there across Prince William Sound, 15 knots, 2-foot waves. As we go down the length of Cook Inlet, northeast winds increase to 35-knot gales, especially around and off Anchor Point, down into lower Cook Inlet with waves 9, 10 feet. On Sunday, we expect northeast winds continuing in Prince William Sound around 20 knots with waves of 4 feet. And north winds 15, picking up to 30 knots from middle and lower portions of Cook Inlet with waves 8 to 9 feet there. And then looking at Kodiak Island on Saturday, southeast winds on the Gulf side of the island, Shelikof Strait, northeast winds to 30 knots. As we come down the length of the peninsula, look for south winds becoming southeast, increasing 30 to 35 knots across the lower panhandle, waves building from 10 to 15 feet off of South Pass. As you get southwest of the ice, as high as 6-foot waves there. north of Cold Bay. And then on Sunday, look for northeast winds, Shelikof Strait to 20 knots, easterly winds to 25 knots off of Akiak. And then generally southerly component to the wind, 25 to 30 knots, Sandpoint down to False Pass. Look for south-southeast winds, 20 to 25 knots, especially there north of Cold Bay, waves 5 to 8 feet. Eastern Aleutians Saturday, gale force winds 40, 45 knots. Waves are going to be 25 feet or so on the North Pacific side, as high as 22 feet in the gap there between Nikolsky and Atka. And as we go further west, look for westerly gales at 35 to 40 knots west of Adak. And for Sunday, that low I showed you, that 960 millibar low, pretty strong, comes up near Kiska, and out ahead of it we expect southeast to south gales 35 to 40 knots across much of the eastern central Aleutians, and again waves could creep upwards above 20 feet, especially Atka, Adak, westward out over the open waters there of the North Pacific. And then on the Bering side, waves building 10 to 14 feet once you get around and west of Nikolsky. Along the southwest coast, ice is extensive, but we're still going to have east-northeast gales to 35 knots out of Bristol Bay and Kuskokwim Bay. Blizzard conditions possible along this area because we just got word this has been upgraded to a blizzard warning, this area of the southwest coast, for late this Friday night into Sunday morning. So we expect several inches, 5-9 inches of snow, but strong winds causing whiteout conditions at times. Brisk northeast winds out of Norton Sound, 30 knots, 35 knots along the lower Yukon Delta, up to 40-knot easterly winds at St. Matthew on the edge of the ice. And then for Sunday, those winds do come down, at least Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, southeast 10 to 15 knots. Offshore flow out of Hooper Bay area at 20 knots, but still winds out of Norton Sound and along at least the upper portion of the Yukon coastline. We expect 25 to 30 knot northeasterly winds. Ice is extensive across the far north. As we go through the Bering Strait, look for winds northeasterly 25 knots, as high as 35 knots on the north end of St. Lawrence Island around Gamble. As we come up along the northwest coast, northwest winds 10 knots north of Point Lay to Utqiagvik, but picking back up 25 to 35 knots here. Eastern Arctic coast, still some blowing, drifting snow along these areas, especially toward Kaktovik. And then by Sunday, the winds do come down a bit there to 25 knots at Kaktovik, and then northeast winds 10 to 15 knots through Utqiagvik. Northeast winds generally around 20-25 knots through the lower Chukchi, and as they pass through the Bering Strait, still northeast winds there at Wales, Port Clarence, and as high as 35-knot northeasterly gales in the vicinity on the north side of St. Lawrence Island.